what's up, everyone? It's John Samuel, and welcome to All Access Live. And today we have a very special guest. We have the Chief Accessibility Officer at Disability Inn, Jeff Wissel. But more importantly, he is my friend. So welcome, Jeff.
John, thank you. It's always an honor and a thrill to be with you, and glad to have a fun conversation today.
Yeah, for sure. You know, this is your second or third time on the show, so I'm really excited to have you back. And, to share, stuff that you're working on, and also just to, let people know again, just about, about you and the stuff you're working on. And I don't know, just to share more about yourself, man. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
So, Jeff, we were talking a little bit earlier today, and I was going through my emails, and I came across an old contact how, after you and I met, and I realized you and I met in early December 2018, right after my son had just been born. And I remember I was extremely tired. I was speaking at Fidelity, and you were on the screen, and, and we connected. And so, you've been kind of working in the accessibility space for some time now, but can you kind of share kind of how you got into accessibility and kind of how you now have become the Chief Accessibility Officer?
Certainly. I remember our first time we met, John, because, when I share a little bit about myself, I learned a lot from you in regards to, how you gracefully in a suave way embraced vision loss, and you were just doing things, doing what you wanted, when you want it, where you want it. And I thought, wow. So you were one of the first folks in my life, that I had in my life that, was blind, low vision, and you were rocking it. So I always just want to share that. But I always share, I'm a white male and I'll be 56 in September. And I always say, I was an actor for probably the first 40 something years of my life. I was a legally blind individual acting like a fully sighted person. And I really was not that good of an actor towards the end, because it's really hard to act that you have vision when, you have a degenerative eye disease like retinitis pigmentosa that I have. Yeah. So for me, I worked for a leading financial firm for 28 years and was a certified financial planner for much of that time. Customer obsessed, loved working with our customers, and did that for 22 years. Then about 8 years ago, I had the opportunity to be on loan to the accessibility department, which was a small team. And I'm an end user of assistive technologies. I started with magnification, and then when I realized I was spending too much mental energy trying to use the vision I had, I switched over to the screen reader 2 decades ago. So I've been an end user of technologies, but I had this opportunity to be on loan, and through that loan, I was connected via email to a colleague in our at the headquarters in a different state where I live. Yeah. And she had lost her vision due to diabetic retinopathy in like a 6-month time frame, and went on to have a 20-year distinguished career. Well, the reason I share the story is she became my mentor, and to this day, one of my best friends. She helped me to realize that the vision loss that I was experiencing and continue to experience, I used to view it as a weakness or a vulnerability simply because I didn't know any better. I didn't have information. I felt alone. I didn't have anyone in my life, in my direct circles, that was blind, low vision. So Alicia helped me to uncover, that it's actually a strength and not a weakness. And that really changed, professionally and a lot of things personally for me, having that connection. So with that being said, we launched an employee resource group for colleagues like myself with disabilities. Started with 6 of us, and I just found out 2 weeks ago there's over 6,500 employees there that are active members, which is really awesome.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to this day, one of the greatest rewards for me was seeing colleagues who were starting to find their inner voice with their disabilities. Yeah. And that is probably the biggest leadership lesson that I've learned, both professionally and personally, is embracing the vulnerabilities that we have, really seeking out information. And for me, it was really associating with the blindness, low vision community, building a network of colleagues and individuals who are blind, low vision, who are in my space, in the accessibility space. But all of that, empowered me with a colleague, to build a business plan, to create an enterprise-wide office of customer accessibility. And then we created this procurement accessibility program and actually started inquiring about the products and services that our firm was buying, if individuals with disabilities could actually use them.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the answer was no. And when I retired from that financial firm, then this amazing opportunity came up to become the first chief accessibility officer at Disability Inn. And I'll just share real quickly for anyone who's not familiar, disabilityin.org is our website. And there's over 450 companies that are our corporate partners. And they lean on Disability Inn for guidance and assistance with building out their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I get the help on the accessibility side. And without accessibility, there's no belonging. And we truly believe accessibility is at the intersection of everything. So I get to work with the accessibility leaders of major corporations on a daily basis. And it's just like this dream come true.
It's awesome. There's so many things that you just talked about, because you've had this amazing journey. I also like the fact that not everybody's in the accessibility space.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's a lot of people in the accessibility world who are part of this call, there's folks who are, in strategy or in analytics. And for instance, like there was a colleague from Coca-Cola who was sharing her experience. She had just recently got a promotion, was taking over going to be leading a new team of people. And then, she raised the question of like, how do you broach the topic of your blindness and to keep your credibility and not, and how do you, talk to people? And it was so amazing how this community of blind leaders start sharing their own experiences. And I think that's like the true value of having this, is like having people who can empathize and understand what you're going through and to be able to pass on their knowledge. And like, I have to thank you, Jeff, for putting this together, because it's been invaluable to me. And it's showing me, like, for too long, we've all felt like we've been alone, and all of a sudden we realize we're not. But I appreciate that, Jeff.
Absolutely. I'll share with you, John, I get to work with corporations on a daily basis. And it's I think one of my roles as Chief Accessibility Officer is to shed light on non-apparent or invisible disabilities, because 70+% of disabilities are non-apparent.
Yep.
And when corporations are building out their business case to launch an enterprise office of customer accessibility and getting the full-time staff, the resources, and so forth, it always starts organically, it seems, and then there's a business case and so forth. And oftentimes it is difficult for leadership to see disability because the vast majority is invisible. We know that of the companies that complete our DEI survey, that they say less than 5% of their employees self-disclose. Yep. And John, we know 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 people throughout the world have some form of a disability.
Yep.
And, but we don't always see it. So I think that's critically important. And the other thing too is, I know, you and I talked about this, but there's something called the unconscious incompetence bias. Yes. I was guilty of this. If I saw someone, for instance, that used a white cane, first I thought they were totally blind. I thought you had to be totally blind to use a white cane. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I also just thought, wow, there's probably stuff that they're not able to do. And that would be the thought I had, and I'd move on about my business or whatever.
Yep.
But being someone who is a avid fan now of the white cane, talk about overcoming a vulnerability, right? The first 100 times I used that thing, I felt so vulnerable, but now it's my identity and it's my, independence cane. But I know that there's going to be folks like me looking at me like I used to be and thinking, wow, there's probably stuff they can't do. Well, I can't fly a plane. Well, I don't know. I haven't tried, but you don't want me flying a plane. But my goal in life as I continue losing vision is to have folks look at me and think, wow, that blind guy's walking around by himself at the airport. He's traveling. He's doing what, I don't know if I could do that. That's overcoming that unconscious bias, incompetence bias. And part of all that is finding your inner voice and embracing disabilities. And all of that's through mentors, through, groups like we have set up and so forth, and just calls like this, just to share. There's days where I think we both probably feel blind some days.
Oh yeah.
But other days it's like, you know what? My blindness or low vision was an impact today, and I did all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's so interesting that how you talk about that unconscious and incompetence biases that you shared, even though about people with canes, because I think that's something that I had myself, right? And I remember coming out of my MBA, and even though I was open about my vision loss in my personal life at that point, I thought companies would see it as a liability. And I think I put the ownership on the company, right? I said, oh, companies are not going to get it. But I think it was my own unconscious and biases that I had about having a disability. And that in that way, at that moment in time, I was like, oh, that's them, not me, right? I had othered people in the blindness community, even though I was part of that community. And it took me meeting Ed Summers, who broke all those stereotypes to me, right? He was a leader. He was independent. He was a father. He was everything that when I was a young kid, sighted kid coming out of college, Ed Summers was everything I wanted to be. But he happened to be blind, right? And that's what I think really broke my model of what blindness was. And I think then it opened up my eyes to meet you. It opened up my eyes to meet all these other amazing people that we know. And I think that's the case. Like, and if I'm going through this loss and I'm that person, how can I imagine somebody who has no idea about what it is to have vision loss? What is their misconceptions of what it is to have blindness? So, and I think you're right. It's having these conversations so we can break down those barriers. Can you talk about that? Kind of your own, like what you've learned about, inaccessible information systems and what you're doing with Procure Access?
Absolutely. And for anyone that's listening or watching this now or later, if you've ever had the experience where you're at work, you're using an application and you use any type of assistive technology. And I use air quotes when I say all of a sudden overnight there's a system enhancement. And all of a sudden the next day you go to do your job using that software program, for instance, and your assistive technology doesn't work at all anymore. It is easy, if we allow ourselves, it's easy to feel less than or incompetent or whatever words you want to put on it. And it simply is a barrier to our ability to access and fully use and fully participate in that task. I talk a lot with our corporations about things that are within their control as an organization. Developers, new definition of done, making sure new code is not released if there are critical or high level accessibility errors, making sure that everyone in the organization realizes they do play a role in accessibility, whether it be sending an email with a picture on it and just putting alt text on there, or being a developer or designer and actually owning certain content on the websites and so forth. Those are certain things that are within every organization's control if they're intentional about it. But let's use the situation of, okay, well, we're going to buy a product or service and bring it in-house for our employees or our customers to use. If we don't ask any questions about the accessibility and usability of that product by individuals with disabilities who may use assistive technologies, we're bringing in something that's going to have to be remediated or fixed. So Procure Access started with my good friend and godfather of accessibility, Larry Goldberg, and Sarah Basson of Google. They years ago were at a conference. They were talking, and their companies both purchased a big program. It was inaccessible, and they're spending a lot of time and resources remediating it, talking to the vendor, and the vendor says, well, you're the first company that's mentioned this. And they're looking at each other thinking, we both mentioned it to them, not that the vendor's lying, maybe it was just different people in the company. But this transpired then, and they got a couple other folks involved. And then when I was at the previous employer, I got involved with it as we were building out our procurement program. And then at Disability In, we're the facilitator of it. But there's over 21 companies that have signed. We have this whole toolkit. Again, disabilityin.org is the website. And under one of the menu, you can click on Procure Access. It has a Procure Access toolkit, which are step-by-step instructions on how to establish an enterprise-wide accessibility procurement program. There's building blocks, there's questionnaires that you can ask of the vendors. And essentially what it is, it's a business-to-business initiative for companies to work collaboratively on prioritizing accessibility throughout the procurement process. And this is an important thing, John. Every company is a buyer of products and services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every company is a seller of a product or service. Mm-hmm. So this initiative is not buyers against sellers or sellers against buyers. It's all these companies working collaboratively to prioritize accessibility.
No, that's 100% agree with you. I think that the procurement, if we can get more accessible systems in place, we're going to be able to have true upward mobility. But in the meantime, I don't want companies to ever say, oh, the system's just not accessible, we're not going to hire someone. We can't let that stop. But I thank you, Jeff, for leading the efforts to make sure that people are signing on, committing to procuring accessibly and putting it into their procurement policies, making sure that this is intentional in their procurement policies, right? Being intentional about what they buy, potentially who they work with. And so thank you for leading that. And I just have to thank you for bringing together, these blind leaders on a monthly basis and allowing me to, listen in, learn from, and thank you for your friendship. I'm just so thankful to have you in my life, and thank you for all the work you're doing.